Emma Green never expected a regular Tuesday morning to turn her world upside down. She was halfway through her coffee when an email from her boss, Nathan Carter, appeared on her screen. Seattle trip confirmed. You're joining me. Prepare presentation notes. Her hands froze midair. Nathan Carter, the CEO of the firm, the man known for his composure and impossible standards, had just chosen her to accompany him. It didn't make sense. She was good at her job, sure, but she wasn't the only capable one. Still, she wasn't about to question the opportunity by afternoon. Emma had a travel bag packed, her nerves buzzing like static. She had never traveled for work before, let alone with Nathan himself. He wasn't intimidating in the usual way, no yelling or arrogance, but he had a calm presence that demanded respect. He walked into a room and everyone instantly straightened. He spoke quietly, but his words carried weight, and for reasons she couldn't quite explain. Emma always found herself noticing him more than she should, the way he thought before speaking, the way his confidence seemed effortless at the airport. Nathan was already waiting near the gate, dressed in his usual crisp shirt and dark jacket. "Ready?" he asked when she approached, his tone neutral, his eyes unreadable. Emma nodded quickly. "Yes, sir." On the plane, she took the window seat beside him, trying to focus on her laptop. The sound of engines filled the silence. Nathan flipped through presentation slides, occasionally glancing her way. "You did good work on this," he said suddenly, surprising her. She looked up. "Thank you. I just hope the clients like it." "They will," he replied simply. His confidence steadied her more than she wanted to admit. Hours later, they landed in Seattle under gray skies. The city lights shimmered against wet streets as rain drizzled. By the time they reached the hotel, both were exhausted. The receptionist smiled politely but looked uneasy. "I'm very sorry, Mr. Carter. There's been a system error. We only have one room left tonight." Nathan frowned. "That can't be right. I booked two." The woman nodded apologetically. "I understand, sir, but a conference is in town, and everything nearby is fully booked." Emma's heart pounded. "One room." She stepped forward, trying to sound calm. "That's fine. I'll take the couch." Nathan turned to her immediately. "Absolutely not. I'll find another hotel. It's almost midnight," she said gently. "You won't find a room this late." "It's okay, really. I'll be fine." He hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with the idea, but her tone left no space for argument. "Fine," he said finally. "But tomorrow I'll make sure this gets fixed." They took the elevator in silence, the air thick with awkwardness. When the doors opened, their room looked elegant but small. One large bed, one couch, a wide window overlooking the city. Emma forced a laugh. "See? Not a big deal." Nathan sighed. "Still, this isn't ideal." "Maybe not," she said, setting down her bag, "but it's just for a night." He nodded slowly, then loosened his tie, his usual professional shell softening. Emma noticed, not intentionally, but the sight made something flutter in her chest. He looked different outside the office. Human, almost gentle. They both sat down to review tomorrow's materials. For a while, the only sound was the quiet hum of the city below and the occasional shuffle of papers. Emma tried to focus, but her thoughts wandered. She had spent months seeing Nathan as untouchable, the kind of man who didn't bend or break. Yet here in this small, rain-soaked room, he felt closer somehow. A sudden clap of thunder shook the windows, making her jump. Nathan looked up immediately. "You okay?" She nodded quickly, embarrassed. "Yeah, just not a fan of storms." He smiled faintly, the corners of his eyes softening. "Neither am I." The words hung there longer than they should have. Something about hearing him say it, something so ordinary, made him seem less like a boss and more like someone real, someone she could understand. Hours passed. The rain outside grew heavier, their laptops dimmed, and exhaustion began to show. Nathan finally stood. "You should rest, Emma. Big day tomorrow." "I will," she said, though she knew sleep wouldn't come easily. She arranged the couch as best she could, trying to act casual. Nathan hesitated before turning off the lamp. "If you need anything." I'll be fine, she interrupted softly. All right, he said, pausing. Good night, Emma. Her heart skipped at the sound of her name spoken like that. Not like a boss to an employee, but gently, almost kindly. Good night, Mr. Carter. There was silence for a while. The storm outside calmed to a soft drizzle. Emma lay still, staring at the ceiling, listening to the faint sounds of him moving, the rustle of paper, the soft click of his pen, the sighs of someone trying not to think too much. She closed her eyes, feeling oddly safe, though she didn't understand why, when she finally started drifting off. She heard him whisper, his voice low and distant, as if he wasn't sure she could hear. You did really well today. A quiet smile formed on her lips. She didn't answer, but the warmth in his tone stayed with her long after sleep found her, and as the rain stopped outside, something inside her shifted, a quiet, unspoken understanding that this trip might change more than just her career. Emma woke up to the faint scent of coffee and the soft hum of rain against the window. For a moment, she didn't remember where she was. The hotel room, the late-night work. The storm, it all came rushing back when she saw Nathan standing by the window, still in his shirt from yesterday, sleeves rolled up, a cup of coffee in his hand. He turned slightly when he heard her stir. Good morning, he said in his calm, steady tone. Emma sat up quickly, trying to gather her thoughts. Morning, she replied, her voice still sleepy. She glanced at her watch and gasped. Oh no, I overslept. Nathan smiled slightly. Relax, we don't leave for another hour. I already ordered breakfast. She blinked, surprised. You did. Couldn't let you start your day without food, he said casually, handing her a cup. You'll need it for the meeting. Emma accepted the coffee, her hands brushing his for a brief second. It was a small thing, but it made her heart beat faster. She quickly looked away, pretending to focus on her notes. They ate breakfast quietly, talking only about work, or at least they tried to. Nathan's usual serious energy felt different this morning. He seemed more relaxed, almost human in a way Emma hadn't seen before. When she accidentally made a small joke about the storm keeping her up, he actually laughed. It wasn't forced or polite, it was real, warm, and so unexpected that she found herself smiling back by the time they reached the conference center. The city had come alive under the gray Seattle sky. Inside, the air buzzed with the sound of executives, presentations, and deals being made. Emma carried the presentation folder close to her chest, her nerves fluttering. Nathan walked beside her, calm and focused, occasionally glancing at her with quiet reassurance. Just follow my lead, said softly as they entered the boardroom. She nodded. Got it. The meeting began, and Emma did her part, presenting data, explaining the new marketing strategy, answering questions with confidence she didn't know she had. Nathan watched her closely, occasionally stepping in to add details or steer the discussion. Together, they worked like a perfect rhythm, her words and his direction blending smoothly. By the end, the clients were smiling and shaking hands. When they left the room, Emma let out a deep breath she'd been holding. That went better than I expected. Nathan's expression softened. You were great. You handled the questions better than most people I've worked with. Thank you, she said, her cheeks warming. Compliments from him were rare and precious. They returned to the hotel that evening, both tired but content. Nathan had a few emails to send, so Emma decided to take a short walk. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets shining under the glow of streetlights. She stopped by a small bookstore nearby and wandered through the aisles, trying to calm her racing thoughts. Everything about the day had felt intense. The success, the teamwork, and especially the growing closeness between her and Nathan. When she returned to the hotel, she found him sitting in the lobby, still in his suit but with his tie loosened, reading a newspaper. He looked up when she entered. Thought you might need a break, he said with a faint smile. There is a little cafe across the street. Come on, she hesitated but followed. The cafe was cozy, warm, and filled with the smell of baked pastries. They sat by the window, and for the first time they weren't talking about work. So, Ethan asked, stirring his coffee, what made you go into marketing? Emma smiled faintly. Honestly, I wanted to tell stories. Not just about products, but about people, about why things matter to them. He nodded thoughtfully. That makes sense? You have that in your work emotion. Most people just chase numbers. His words surprised her. You've noticed that. He looked up at her, eyes steady. I notice more than you think. For a second, the air between them shifted, not romantic, but something deeper. Respect, understanding, a connection that didn't need words. They talked for over an hour about work, dreams, little moments of life outside the office. Emma found herself laughing more than she had in weeks. Nathan listened carefully, occasionally smiling, his usual sternness fading into something warmer. When they walked back, the air was cool and still. Emma looked at him and said quietly, "You're different outside the office." He chuckled softly. "So are you." Back in the hotel room, the awkwardness from last night was gone. They worked side by side on a few last-minute notes for the report. Nathan leaned back after a while and said, "You know, Emma, I don't say this often, but I'm glad you came on this trip." Her heart skipped. "Really?" He nodded. "You've reminded me why I love this work. Sometimes I forget." Emma didn't know what to say. For a man like Nathan, always composed, always serious, that kind of honesty was rare. She smiled softly. "I'm glad I came too." The room fell quiet for a moment. The city lights shimmered through the window, casting a soft glow around them. Nathan finally stood, walking toward the window, looking out. "Funny thing," he said after a pause, "you work hard for years. And then one day you realize it's not the success that matters, but the people you meet along the way." Emma's voice was soft when she replied, "I think I understand that." He turned slightly, meeting her gaze. "I think you do." The silence stretched again, comfortable this time. It wasn't tension. It was understanding, the kind that forms when two people finally see each other clearly. When she finally went to bed that night, Emma lay awake for a while, thinking about the day. She had seen a new side of Nathan, the man behind the title. And deep down, she knew something had quietly changed between them. It wasn't something either of them would name, but it was there, delicate and unspoken. As she drifted to sleep, one thought stayed in her mind. Maybe this trip wasn't just about work. Maybe it was the beginning of something neither of them had expected. The next morning came with a golden glow through the curtains. And for once, Emma woke up before Nathan. The sound of the city below was faint, like a quiet hum. She sat by the window with her coffee, watching people hurry through the streets, feeling a strange peace she hadn't felt in months. This business trip had started as just another assignment. But now everything felt different, lighter, warmer, alive. Nathan stepped out of his room adjoining hers, already dressed for the day, his usual composed look in place. "You're up early," he said, noticing her by the window. "I couldn't sleep much," she admitted. "Too many thoughts about the project." He asked with a small smile. She hesitated. "Something like that?" They headed to the final conference meeting where the results of their presentation would be discussed. Emma tried to focus on work, but Nathan's calm confidence beside her made her feel strangely steady. Every now and then, their eyes met, quick, unplanned glances that lingered just a second too long. It wasn't something either of them wanted to show, but it was there. The meeting went even better than expected. The clients praised their teamwork, calling it refreshingly human and genuine. Nathan rarely smiled during meetings, but this time he did. Not the polite kind, but a real one. When the final handshake was done, he turned to Emma and said quietly, "We did it." Her heart lifted. We really did. They spent the afternoon finishing paperwork and making travel arrangements for the next day. When Nathan suggested they take a short walk before dinner, Emma was surprised but agreed. The air was crisp, and the streets shimmered from a light drizzle earlier. They walked side by side in easy silence. At one point, they stopped by the waterfront, where the view of the bay stretched endlessly. Nathan leaned against the railing, looking out. I haven't done this in a long time, he said softly. Done what? Stop to just breathe. Watch something simple. He glanced at her. You remind me to do that? Emma looked away, hiding a smile. I guess we both needed this trip more than we thought. Ha, he nodded. Maybe so. As the evening approached, they returned to the hotel to get ready for dinner. Their client had invited them to a formal restaurant nearby. Emma wore a simple black dress, professional but elegant. Nathan, in his dark suit, looked effortlessly sharp. When he saw her in the lobby, he paused for a brief second, caught off guard. You look great, he said finally. She smiled. You too. Dinner went smoothly. Conversation flowed easily. Laughter came naturally, and for once, work didn't dominate the night. When it ended, the client left, thanking them warmly, and Nathan offered to walk Emma back. The streets were quiet, lit by soft yellow lights. Their footsteps echoing gently. They reached the hotel, but neither moved to go inside right away. Emma looked up at the sky. I'll miss this place, she said quietly. Nathan's voice was calm, but there was a hint of something deeper. Me too. The next morning was their flight back home. Emma woke early, her bags already packed, but her thoughts weren't settled. She kept replaying small moments. His laugh, his compliment, the quiet walks. It wasn't love. Not yet. But it was something close. On the plane, they sat side by side again. Nathan worked through emails for a while, but halfway through the flight, he closed his laptop. You did good, Emma, he said, not looking at her. Better than I expected. You're more than just potential. You've proven yourself. Her chest tightened at his words. Thank you. That means a lot. He looked at her then, eyes softer than she'd ever seen. It should. You've earned it. The flight continued in a comfortable quiet. Occasionally, he'd glance her way, and she'd pretend not to notice. But inside, she felt every look. When they landed back in New York, it felt strange, like returning from a dream. They collected their luggage, stood by the terminal doors, unsure what to say. So, she said finally, back to reality. Nathan gave a faint smile. Back to the chaos. Then, more quietly. But I'm glad you were there. It's made a difference. Emma nodded, holding his gaze. Me too. He hesitated for a moment, as if wanting to say something more. But then his phone rang. I have to take this, he said quickly, stepping aside. She understood that was Nathan. Always the professional. Always in control. She watched him walk away, feeling a mix of warmth and ache. Something had begun between them, not in words, but in the quiet spaces they'd shared. She didn't know what would come next, but deep down, she hoped this wasn't the end. The following week, at the office, things seemed normal, or at least they tried to be. Nathan was back to his usual routine, meetings, calls, deadlines. Emma returned to her desk, working hard but distracted. Their eyes met across the hall. A few times, and each time it felt like a small secret they carried. One evening, as most employees had left, Emma was finishing a report when Nathan appeared at her desk. Still here? He asked. Almost done, she replied. Just trying to get ahead before the next round of projects. Kay nodded, stepping closer. You've been doing that since the trip, pushing harder. She gave a small smile. You set the standard pretty high. Nathan looked at her for a moment, then said softly, You've already met it. Her breath caught, but before she could reply, he added, Walk with me. They stepped out into the quiet evening streets, the city lights glowing. Nathan seemed different, less like her boss, more like someone letting down walls he'd built for years. I've been thinking, he said finally. That trip, it reminded me what it's like to work with someone who actually cares. I do care, Emma said gently. Not just about work, about doing something that means something. He nodded slowly. I see that and I respect it. A lot. For a moment they stood in silence. The air between them was full, not of words, but of everything unspoken. Nathan's eyes softened. I don't want you to think I didn't notice what you brought to the project, to the team, to me. Emma's heart raced. Nathan. He took a step back, as if catching himself. I'm not saying anything inappropriate, he said quickly, his tone steady. I just mean, it's rare to meet someone who changes how you see things. She smiled faintly. I understand. They stood there for a few seconds longer, neither moving. The city noise filled the space. Car horns, footsteps, the pulse of New York life. Finally, Nathan said softly, "Good night, Emma." "Good night," she whispered, as she watched him walk away. She realized something had shifted again, not in what they said, but in what they didn't. There was connection, care, and something tender growing quietly beneath the surface. It wasn't love yet, but it was the kind of beginning that could become something real. That night, lying in bed, Emma replayed the week in her mind. The trip, the late talks, the way he looked at her sometimes like she was more than an employee. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but she knew she wasn't the same woman who had left for that business trip. Something had changed inside her, and maybe, just maybe, inside him too. Days turned into weeks after the business trip. But something about it lingered. The quiet moments, the shared glances, the warmth between them that neither dared to name. Emma tried to bury herself in work, pretending everything was the same. But it wasn't. Every time Nathan's voice carried across the office, her heartbeat reminded her of how close they had once been, of that unspoken understanding that had formed between them. Nathan, too, seemed changed. He was still composed and confident, still the leader everyone admired. But there was a gentleness in the way he spoke to her now, a carefulness that hadn't been there before. He often stopped by her desk to ask about projects that didn't need his attention, or offered her coffee during long meetings, small gestures that didn't go unnoticed by anyone, especially Emma. Then, one afternoon, everything shifted again. Emma received an email marked urgent, a client emergency. A presentation had to be redone overnight for a major investor. Nathan called her into his office immediately. "You're the only one I trust with this," he said simply. They worked late into the night. The office grew quiet as everyone else left, leaving only the sound of typing and soft jazz from Nathan's playlist. Time passed quickly. They were deep in focus, occasionally sharing a comment or laugh to stay awake. Around midnight, Emma rubbed her temples and sighed. "My brain's shutting down," she murmured. Nathan leaned back, loosening his tie. "You've done enough for tonight. Let's take a break." He got up and poured her a cup of tea from the small office kettle. She smiled softly. "You're making tea now? That's new. I'm trying to learn how to slow down," he replied. "You taught me that." They stood by the window, sipping tea, watching the city lights below. From that high floor, the streets looked peaceful, cars like tiny moving stars. Emma felt the tiredness fade, replaced by something tender and unspoken. Nathan broke the silence. "You know, I wasn't supposed to be on that trip," he said quietly. She turned to him, surprised. "What do you mean?" "It was meant for someone else, but I took it because I wanted to see how you handled things. I wanted to know if you were ready for more responsibility." She smiled faintly. "And was I?" He looked at her with that familiar, steady gaze. "More than ready. But somewhere along the way, I stopped evaluating you as an employee." Emma froze, her heartbeat loud in her ears. "Nathan." He held up a hand, almost apologetic. "I know. I shouldn't say that. It's complicated. I just needed you to know that you've changed how I see everything: work, balance, life." There was nothing inappropriate in his tone, only honesty and emotion that had been bottled up for too long. Emma didn't know what to say, so she just looked at him, her eyes soft. "You've changed me too," she admitted. "You made me believe I could do more than I thought I could." Nathan smiled, a small, real smile that made him look younger, almost vulnerable. Then maybe it was worth it. The moment hung between them, fragile and real. Then the lights flickered, a reminder of how late it had gotten. Nathan laughed quietly. "I think the building wants us to leave." They packed up and stepped outside into the cool night air. The city was half asleep, the streets quiet except for the distant hum of traffic. Nathan walked beside her toward the parking lot. "I'll drive you home," he said, his voice firm but kind. The ride was calm, filled with a comfortable silence. The world outside blurred past streetlights, reflections, the faint glow of the moon. When they reached her apartment building, Emma hesitated before unbuckling her seatbelt. "Thank you." "For everything," she said softly. He turned to her, his eyes warm. "You don't have to thank me, Emma. You earned every bit of what you've achieved." She smiled. "Still, I will." For a moment, they just sat there, neither wanting the night to end. Then Nathan exhaled slowly, almost reluctantly. "Good night, Emma." She opened the door, but paused. "Good night, Nathan." When she stepped out, he waited until she was safely inside before driving away, his thoughts heavy and calm at the same time. He knew that what they shared couldn't be labeled, not yet, but it was something real. Something that had quietly saved a part of both of them in the weeks that followed. Things began to shift again, not with grand gestures, but small, meaningful changes. Nathan started delegating more, trusting his team, and Emma became more confident in her new leadership role. They still shared long meetings, quiet conversations, and knowing smiles that spoke of something deeper than words. Then one Friday evening, the company held a small dinner to celebrate the success of the project they had worked on. The atmosphere was warm, filled with laughter and music. Emma looked radiant, and when Nathan gave his short speech, he made sure to say, "This success belongs to my team, especially Emma, whose dedication made all the difference." Everyone clapped, and Emma felt her heart swell. Later, as people mingled and music played softly, Nathan approached her with 2 glasses of sparkling water. "A toast," he said. "To what?" she asked, smiling. "2 second chances," he replied. She clinked her glass with his. "And new beginnings." They stood by the balcony, looking at the city lights again, just like before. But this time with a sense of peace. Nathan spoke quietly. "That night in Seattle, the one when the hotel ran out of rooms, I kept thinking it was a mistake. But maybe it wasn't." Emma turned to him, her eyes meeting his. Maybe it was exactly what needed to happen. For a long moment, they just looked at each other. No words, no rush, no confusion. Just understanding to people who had walked the line between duty and emotion. Now standing at a place where both could exist together. Nathan smiled faintly. "Whatever happens next, I'm glad it was you." Emma's eyes softened. "Me too." The music behind them grew louder. Laughter filled the room, but for them, everything felt quiet and steady. They didn't need promises or confessions. Sometimes love doesn't arrive with grand declarations. It shows up softly in late-night talks, shared coffees, and the comfort of knowing someone truly sees you. When the evening ended, Nathan offered his hand as they walked out together. Emma hesitated for only a second before taking it. It wasn't dramatic or romantic in a movie way. It was simple, human, right? As they stepped into the cool night air, the city glowing around them, Emma thought about how unexpected everything had been. A business trip, a shared room, a long week of deadlines. Yet it had led her here to something honest and quietly beautiful. Nathan looked at her, his eyes reflecting the city lights. "You ready for the next chapter?" She smiled, the kind that held both calm and hope. "I think I am." They walked away side by side, not needing to say anything else. The night was calm, the world moved on. But something had changed forever, to people finding warmth where they least expected it. And in that quiet, ordinary moment, their story, the one that began with an unexpected room, finally found its peace.